Fig trees in containers are incredibly easy to overwinter, but I wouldn't keep them out here, and I'll show you exactly why. This container fig I've kept inside in my house for a long time now because out here it really wouldn't survive. I've been digging around in my garden to see how far down the soil is frozen, and I have a big chunk pulled out here, and you can see that is pretty frozen down to about 4 or 5 inches before the soil starts to get soft, and I actually found worms and some other soil life in there. But if I put this container fig right next to this big chunk of solid ground, what you can see is that if I left this out, this container fig out above ground especially, it probably would have frozen solid and it wouldn't have survived. Here in Ohio, that's just the reality of the situation here in winter. Is we're getting a lot of freezing temps, and it's freezing the soil down to about 4 or 5 inches or so. But this container fig, I'm gonna take over to my house where I have it inside and show you exactly what I'm doing. If you're a beginner and you wanna start growing trees, I can't recommend container figs or fig trees in general highly enough. They are incredibly easy to start from cuttings. And if you keep them in containers, they are extremely easy. They are about the easiest to overwinter. They're zero maintenance. They're pretty much zero watering in a lot of cases, and you don't have to worry if they are surviving. It's very clear if they are when you have them inside in containers. In addition to container figs, I also have some fig trees in the ground over here. And this is one of the fig trees I have in the ground. You really can't grow a fig tree outside in this type of climate without some kind of protection. I put down a thick mulch, and also there's a thick layer of snow. Beneath this layer of snow is a thick mulch that's allowing this fig tree to survive here in the brutal Ohio winters. But if you live in a small space, such as an apartment, you don't even have land where you can plant a tree, or a garden for that matter, then a container fig like this is a great option. It's so easy, as I said, in the winter, zero maintenance, and I'll show you exactly what I'm doing here in my house. Here in my garage are all of these fig trees, but you know what I like more than fig trees? Knowledge. I have them just lined up here against the wall. They are overwintering perfectly fine here. There's no green growth or anything going on the tips, no budding on the tips of these fig trees, which means they're in a really good dormant overwintering state. You really need to keep them cold if you want to overwinter them. It stays, above freezing here. It probably stays around 30 to 50 degrees in the winter, depending on what it's like outside. But this is a good place to keep them if you don't want them to grow. And the reason why you don't want them to grow in the winter is because they're not gonna have access to light. But there is an option to keep them inside if you don't have an environment like this, and still have them grow in the winter and get ready for springtime. Here in my laundry room, I have a few more fig trees. And the reason why I have these here is because they just didn't make it to the garage. I didn't put them in there yet. But because it's a little bit warmer in here, I'm getting a little bit of green growth on the tips of these fig trees. You can see there's definitely some growth going on, some activity there. So this is not ideal to keep fig trees in an environment where they are starting to grow but don't have access to a lot of light. Here is the door to the outside, and it's usually closed like that, and it's just this one window, which is enough light for something like this indoor house plant. But for these fig trees, it's not really sufficient to get them going and kickstarted for springtime. Now, if you live in an apartment, you don't have any land, you don't have any space to garden or grow trees, but you have an indoor windowsill like this that does get some sunshine, you don't need to store your container figs in a completely cold location where they won't grow. You can take your container figs And in the early winter, a couple months before your last frost date, you could actually put your fig tree in a sunny windowsill, the most light you have in your location, and they'll actually start to grow a little bit indoors. It's not going to be anything crazy, anything significant, but it will kickstart them for springtime, and then you'll get a head start on the growing season when you can put them outdoors. And another thing you can do is when the temps start to warm up outside for these fig trees, you can just open up the sliding glass door or window and place that fig tree outside, let it get some sunlight and warmth. And then at night when the temps start to drop and it's not really hospitable for this fig tree, you can bring it back inside and close up that door to keep it safe and warm inside during the lows. Watering a container fig during the winter is incredibly easy. You really shouldn't need to water that much, if at all. And I'll plop this fig tree down right here so I can show you what the soil should look like. I'll pull this out and you can see the soil is wet but not dripping. It's just slightly moist, and that's about perfect for a fig tree that's overwintering. Again, those roots are not doing much growing. They're in a dormant state at pretty much a standstill during the winter, especially if you're keeping this in a location where the temps are pretty low. So it really shouldn't need that much water at all. It's not using that water during the winter, but you should monitor your soil. And if you see that the soil is drying out at all, especially if you stick your finger in there down to about 1 or 2 inches and it's pretty dry, definitely give it just a little bit of water, not too much. You don't want it to be oversaturated and potentially get root rot in the tree. But I found that to be a non-issue. I didn't really have to worry about the watering too much in the winter. When I overwintered fig trees last year, I just left them and they were pretty much good. I think I added like 1 cup of water at one time. Fertilizing a fig tree in the winter, you really shouldn't need to worry too much about that either. Maybe in the fall, you just top dress it with your organic fertilizer choice that you're using for your fig trees. And then when the spring picks back up, you can do your fertilization for your container figs, which figs really do need quite a lot of food and fertilizer when they are growing in containers, because normally these root systems would spread out really far underground and have access to tons of water and nutrients. But if they're in containers, they do need quite a bit of tender loving care in the form of fertilizer and water. But the good news is that you can take a break from doing all of that fig care during the winter, because they're just going to sit there dormant doing their thing and you don't have to worry about a thing. If you're missing springtime and you're thinking about all the things you want to start in the garden or start a tree for the first time, the container fig is a great place to start. And my first experiences with fig trees were when I took cuttings of fig trees in California for the very first time. I kept them humid and in a little bit of potting mix, and they actually took off. They set roots. Just my very first attempt at starting fig trees from cuttings, which was pretty amazing and pretty encouraging. So I would recommend highly to try fig trees if you're gonna try starting a tree from a cutting. But if you want to keep things simpler, the big box stores and especially local nurseries, which it's really good to support those, have these container figs a lot of time in the spring and the fall. And then a pro tip here is in the later summertime, they often will discount these fig trees to move inventory if they have too many on hand, and that's a good time to look for them. Finde thanks you for watching this video.